William Eggleston is regularly attributed to snapshot photos of everyday mundane objects, like tricycles, light bulbs, cars, parking lots, and signage. But he's also created a decent amount of portrait photos throughout his career. I want to examine what makes those photos stand out from his other work if they do at all, why they often get less coverage, and how much significance they hold in the grand scheme of the unbelievably sizable body of work he has amassed throughout his life. This is Insight for Inspiration, William Eggleston. This video is brought to you by Dehancer Film Emulation. Eggleston's portraits were made in both black and white and color, and contain subjects that range from strangers to family, friends, and acquaintances. He started creating portrait photos in the early 1960s, at the same time that he began to take photography seriously. During a 5-year period in the 60s, black and white portraiture was the primary focus of Eggleston's photography. This work was first exhibited at the National Portrait Gallery in the UK in 2016, and featured 100 photos taken throughout the entire course of Eggleston's photographic career. At first, a lot of this work was created at night, using high-speed films to avoid drawing attention to himself from his subjects. According to photography historian Phillip Prodger, he obtained a special high-speed police surveillance film, and since it was not available in the right size, cut it by hand, including sprocket holes, in order to load it into a 110 spy camera. This accounts for the pronounced, otherworldly grain in pictures such as Untitled 1966. Eggleston did his best to not let on to his subjects that they were being photographed during this period, which explains the candid images that have a distinct quality to them. This has caused several writers who study Eggleston's work to make a comparison between these photos and the paintings of Edward Hopper, which often contain the same kinds of figures. In regard to the look and feel of Eggleston portraits, Sofia Coppola had this to say: "So many people take those simple snapshots of life, but there's something about Eggleston that no one can match. So many of his images I've seen over the years stay with me, like a pastel memory from another time." These black and white photos matter because they establish the baseline for Eggleston's photographic sensibilities, an eye for the quiet dignity of ordinary people, often anonymous, who sit uneasily between documentary capture and psychological distance. Eggleston's earliest work already leaned towards ambiguity and atmosphere. Much later in life, in regard to his portrait photos, Eggleston stated, "I'm just not interested in, nor consider myself a portrait photographer one bit. Sometimes people just appear." And it's really this, above all else, that explains why Eggleston's portrait photos get so much less coverage. His pioneering use of color and his embrace of the snapshot aesthetic have drawn so much attention that his portraits often get sidelined. The one aspect of Eggleston's photography that is often highlighted was his revolutionary use of color. His use of the dye transfer process to color his images in print is what gives them their signature oversaturated look, and Eggleston applied the same process to his portraiture. Prodger describes this saying, "The corded red corduroy, worn by William Eggleston III, shimmers like a beacon. The sky above, a contrasting plane of midnight blue. The yellow dress worn by a short-haired woman carrying a handbag becomes a screen behind which the figure stands. A different yellow, ornamented with white flowers, enrobes the artist's wife, Rosa, like an international Gothic painting. A woman seated in a diner and smoking a cigarette, seen from the back, seems sandwiched between the enveloping red of the brick wall in front of her and the long green banquet on which she sits. Isolated splashes of color are frequently the only glue that holds an Eggleston composition together, enabling the artist to be graphically adventurous, giving emphasis to certain elements that might seem inconsequential in black and white, and lending visual excitement to otherwise unassuming subjects." This video is brought to you by Dehancer Film Emulation, a plugin to help photographers and videographers achieve the look of film through digital means within the following software. For more information on how Dehancer can help you achieve the look of film on your frames by adding authentic and tested looks, compression, grain, halation, bloom, and more, check the link in the description. When Eggleston moved to color, there was a period where his infatuation with portrait photos fell off, in exchange for the type of images he is typically well known for creating. However, he did create some color portraits as well. The portrait featured on the cover of this book is one that Eggleston considered to be his first successful color image. Eggleston summarized his feelings about this photo, stating that it was of some kind of pimply, freckled-faced guy in the late sunlight. And by God, it all worked. It's difficult to pin down exactly why Eggleston moved away from portraiture when he moved away from black and white photography. But it must have had something to do with the infatuation he found in capturing color itself, and all of the colors that could be captured. Many point to the dye transfer process he used to print his color work as one of the key aspects of this. According to curator Thomas Wesky, the dye transfer technique allows William Eggleston to subjectively control colors like a painter. and this manner of interpretation contributes to the fact that you often have the feeling of consciously seeing an object for the first time. While Eggleston did move to focus largely on color and away from portraiture in the late part of the 1960s, it wasn't the end of his use of black and white or the attention that he paid to human subjects. In 1973, a new series of portraits came to life, the Nightclub portraits, made on large format cameras, and a lengthy amount of video footage that became known as Stranded in Canton. Both of these were created around the same time. Prodger writes that, as he did with the spy camera, Eggleston adapted the proto-pack cameras for low-light conditions, replacing utilitarian factor-supplied zoom lenses with high-quality lenses designed for 16mm film cameras, and later, adapting one of the video cameras with an infrared picture tube. With this camera, Eggleston created images in bars and nightclubs throughout Mississippi, Memphis, and New Orleans. Within the video, these images were cut between that and his home life. Additionally, to create the large format photos of this period, Eggleston brought a mobile studio of different lighting kits that allowed him to make images of the people he interfaced with, since many of these encounters took place in environments with less light. The images later became the backbone of his lectures, while he was a professor at Harvard in the 1970s. Within the portraits that Eggleston created are also those of celebrities. The creation of these images was limited, but they do include some truly outstanding people. Actor and photographer Dennis Hopper, Joe Strummer of The Clash, filmmaker David Lynch, and behind-the-scenes photos of film sets that include John Huston's Annie, David Byrne's True Stories, and Cassie Lemon's Eve's Bayou. Even though those photos of film sets tend to have a focus on more of Eggleston's standard fare over the actors. The process of creating these celebrity portraits was done with a similar process to his traditional approach, resulting in snapshot-like images that bring figures that are larger than life down to a humanized level. And the commentary around Eggleston's portraits asks us to reevaluate what the trademarks of portraiture really are. This in itself is interesting, for it makes us look uncomfortably at some of the presumptions on which portrait practice is built. Photographic portraiture gravitates towards likeness. Looking at a clear head and shoulders photograph of a person with a known biography at an intimate distance is meant to reveal something about them, to provide insight. It is a romantic idea, to look into the eyes of the sitter so that we might peer into their soul. Yet, who is to say that at that moment, in that place, from that distance, at that angle, a photograph tells us anything at all about what drives a person, what shapes them, how they think, or whether such things even matter. Eggleston is the antidote to such overreaching conceits. And some would argue that they don't matter at all. Eggleston's work is as remarkable and thought-provoking as you want it to be. At certain instances when I'm exploring what he's created, I find it difficult to really justify any of it being high quality, while at the same time I'm fully aware of his influence, and the consideration that has to be made for the time and place that he created so much of what he did. Overall, what brings Eggleston's portrait work to life is the same core element that brings attention to all of his work, viewing it in its entirety. The sequence of these photos brings context to the body of work as a whole. It's the sequencing and sheer number of photos that make some of the giant volumes he's created, like the Democratic Forest, appealing. While by and large most of Eggleston's photos don't stand out on their own, something about viewing them side by side with one another makes them more compelling to look at, almost as if you enter the flow state while consuming them. Once again referring to Prodger, he put it like this: while individual portraits may draw us in, it is not in their individuality that we find their full force, but in the connecting and reconnecting of thought and feeling that they collectively represent. They are determinedly incomplete, resisting all attempts at tidy resolution. This, in the end, is the key to their beauty. Duchamp would have told us that the camera makes no distinction between subjects. It is incapable of social comment, holds no affections, and knows no politics. In the case of portraiture, it cannot reveal identity, only provide inadequate vignettes of encounters. Photography might be valued for its evidentiary qualities, but the things it shows us are innately superficial. As viewers, we cannot know the sitter as the photographer did, and he in turn knows them only through the prism of his own experience. The camera does not know them at all. Eggleston's portraiture somehow stands at odds with what he's most well known for creating, while still appearing to remain in canon with all of his other work. In the grand scheme of all that he's created, I don't know that they hold that much weight when compared to books like William Eggleston's Guide and The Democratic Forest. The details around this work are limited from what I can find, but I think it's wise to explore what well-known photographers created on the outskirts of what they're most known for. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, keep developing.